Hi, nice to meet all of you. My name's Blake Deal, and I've been a real estate lawyer up in the Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra Beach area since 1996. And the way that this whole thing got started was I was happily in my law office one day, and a guy came to the front desk and wanted to see me, and the receptionist told him I was busy, and he said, well, go back there and tell him that I'm getting ready to file a lawsuit against him. And so I obviously let him in my office. And so he came in and he sat down with me and he explained what had happened. It was really bad because I had handled the closing on his last house and the recent house. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what he was so upset about, but it was basically that he had not known about portability. And because he didn't handle the filing properly, it cost him, and he lost $500,000, which is the maximum amount of portability. And if you use a ballpark tax rate for Florida of 2%, that equates to $10,000 a year on your tax bill. So his tax bill was going to be $10,000 a year higher for the rest of his life in his house. And he was pretty upset with me about it. And the reason he was upset with me about it is he found out about it at the property appraiser's office. And the property appraiser, when he got all upset, had said, well, this is really something that the title agents and the realtors are supposed to deal with. So he went and he yelled at his realtor first. And not surprisingly, the realtor said, this is something that the title agents handle. Okay. So, and it was kind of funny because when we were interviewing Tatiana over the phone the first time, it was a phone interview, and I was kind of going into this stuff, and she interrupts me and she goes, why are you telling me this? The real estate attorneys and the title agents handle all this. So she was sticking up for you from the very beginning. But then the second thing that happened is a builder client that I do 4 or 5 closings for a month that are $1 million plus closings. He came in my office and said, I want to talk to you. And he didn't look very happy. And so I sat him down and what's going on, John? And he said, I always tell everybody that you're the smartest guy I know, but I got to tell you right now, I'm pretty disappointed in you. And that's not what you want to hear from someone that's sending you $5 million a month business. And I had handled the closing on he and his wife's personal home, and he had had a portability related issue that it also cost him the $500,000 max, which was $10,000 a year for the rest of his life. And he had yelled at the property appraiser who had said the title agents and realtors handle this stuff. And so he was a pretty smart guy. He had done quite a bit of research. And he said, before we even get started, go in there and pull one of your closing files. And I said, okay. And I brought it back. And he said, show me where the contract is. And I looked, and there's the contract. And he said, show me where the sales price is. I said, right there, John. And he goes, show me the property record card. I said, okay. And I flipped to it. And he said, show me where you see the market value on there. And I said, right there. And he goes, so in other words, the information was right in front of you from the very first day you opened the file in your office. And in 5 minutes of your time, you could have saved me from this happening to me. And I know that your position is you've never done this. This isn't something that y'all have handled in an industry, but you should. And so I really took it to heart. I started sending out warning letters to people 2 years ago that were doing closings in my office to alert them if they had what we call a low market value issue. And what would happen is people would call me up and yell at me and, I got this stupid letter that says it's going to cost me $3,000 a year, $8,000 a year, and what does this mean? And I would explain it. And then most of the time they would want me to fix whatever the problem was. So I started taking on these cases, fixing them, and handled dozens and dozens and dozens of them, and really learned the system. All 67 counties operate on the exact same framework under the Department of Revenue using the exact same forms. So it's nice because if you know it for one county, it works for all 67 counties. And so what I started doing, always when I did a closing, is at the end of the closing, I'd give this little 2-minute speech on homestead. I'd say, You're going to get a package in the mail in about 30 days from my office. It's going to have your recorded deed and your title policy in it. And you need to let that be your reminder to file for homestead. And homestead is really important. It can save you a lot of money. You need to file for it by March the 1st. If you don't, your taxes can go way up and you'll lose an exemption that will save you $1,000 a year. And about that time, the realtor will always interrupt me and go, "Oh, you don't have to worry. I send you a card in February that'll remind you to file for homestead. I watch out for you. I look out for you. I will be watching to make sure everything's okay," right? And so when I started finding out more about portability, I added that to the speech. And then I started adding market value to the speech. And all of a sudden, the speech now is like 5 minutes long. When I'd go into it, the realtors would look at their watches and, "If you don't mind, I just want to thank you for your business. Here's this bottle of wine. I got to take off." Boom, the realtors would leave me sitting there with the people to finish the explanation. The people, the moving vans out there in the parking lot with the dogs sitting in the front seat. And they're like, "Do we have to talk about this now?" And I would always say, "Well, we put a little information sheet here in your closing papers for you. Please look that over." I don't think anyone ever did. And I realized that I was having the conversation too late because the most important things that we should have checked on would have had to have been checked on at the beginning of the closing, not at the closing table. So one day the light bulb went off and I said, we in the industry just need a better tool for dealing with this because none of us understand it. I went 20 some years without understanding it. And we're never going to all sit down and go into an in-depth study. I was giving a presentation to a group of realtors a couple weeks ago, and one of the realtors kept interrupting me about one of the exemptions. But now was that $250,000 and 25 years, and what was the income? And I looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Well, I'm trying to figure out about this exemption that a senior citizen can be completely exempt from paying property tax." And I said, "Why?" And she goes, well, I want to tell my clients about this. This is important." And I said, "Well, there's about 30 other exemptions. So are we going to camp out until next week and go through all those?" And she's like, "No." And I said, "You're missing the point. The point is you've never gotten this down. You've never understood it. None of you in the room ever have. And so let's stop trying to halfway do it and just use a tool that 100% does it. And I'm sorry, but it costs $100. Okay. So, we are Florida Homestead Check. We consider ourselves to be like the TurboTax or the H&R Block of property tax. And basically what we do is through this amazing technology that has been built by some very smart people in our company is we can instantaneously essentially figure out all this stuff and put it in an easy to understand report. And then when the people don't understand it, which they never do, we've got a counseling center that they can call and experts that will walk them through all of their questions. And then what we call the doctor center, which is the hospital, where we can fix any of the problems that they have. And we tell everyone that our goal is that they not need the counselors or the doctors because the report that we produce is very easy to understand and gives step-by-step instructions on how to fix any issues. But we find out that a lot of people, they don't want to read, they don't want to do anything, they just want somebody to handle it for them. And so we're there to do that. But the first thing we always tell them is, "Sir, you really don't need us. If you'll just read the report and do what it says, you won't even need us." So with that little introduction, what I've done is written, and a couple of the courses that I've written are being reviewed and hopefully approved by the various agencies for continuing legal education for attorneys and continuing education for realtors and continuing education for title agents. So we expect those approvals in the next 60 days or so. So you'll probably be able to do this at some point in the future and get some CE credit. But have all of you received the PDF of this course and then the checklist that I wrote? Okay. So my goal is to give you some tools to help with this. So let me, when I say the PDFs, it's in your email.
I sent it out to you yesterday afternoon about 3 o'clock, so look past it through your email.
So what I'm showing you up here is actually what that PDF was. So if you didn't get it for any reason, I'm sure that she can send it to you again. So, so how many of you consider yourselves to be a great realtor? Okay. You raised your hand.
Yeah.
What do you think makes you a great realtor?
Just, stuff like this, continuing education. I wasn't aware of this, but I had an issue with a client. It wasn't about portability, but it was about their homestead and
Now forget about that. What makes you a great realtor?
paying attention to my clients and
All right, he said it right off the bat. Paying attention to his clients and looking out for his clients, right? So I've taught the contracts class and the listing agreement class for the Northeast Florida Association of Realtors up until last year. I taught it for over 18 years. And I would tell those groups of 200 realtors every 2 weeks sitting in a room going through orientation that the reason people are hiring you is they're hiring you to be a guide through this mysterious process called a real estate transaction. And they fully expect in their minds that you're going to find out and tell them about anything important that they ought to know going through that process. Now, if you're a good guide, they'll say nice things about you to their friends and you'll build your network. If you're a bad guide and you end up going over some unplanned waterfalls or getting attacked by grizzly bears, okay, on this rafting trip that you're going down the river called a real estate closing, they're not going to tell their friends good things about you, and you're not going to be a realtor for very long. None of you, or very few of you, are probably new realtors, so you've learned this. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, it's sort of a hard job for me because I have to tell you that there's something that was really big and really important and really involved a lot of money that you've been missing. Now, it has been a thing for a few years. But unfortunately, I'm the first one to dig it up, but it was because I had two people get really upset with me. So I'm not naive enough to think that I'm the only person in Florida that was happening to. I'm sure it's been happening other places. It's just I was the first one to take it and do something with it. And I'm sure there's going to be other companies like ours in the future. There's always, folks that take ideas and run with them. But it's a good thing, because it's something that a lot of people were getting hurt. It comes from the portability laws. And portability was passed in 2008. Well, I was happily doing my real estate closing practice in 2008, and I did 104 closings the month before Lehman Brothers went under. The month after Lehman Brothers went under, I did 4 closings. Okay, so I don't know how many of you remember those days. They were dark days, okay? We all learned about short sales and REO properties and foreclosures and stuff. It sucked. I'm sorry, but it did. And I'm glad it's over. But the portability laws were passed to be a temporary boost, a temporary help to people, and they were supposed to expire, but then they got permanently extended. And because they were passed as sort of a temporary thing, they weren't set up as well as they should have been, and it has created a problem. And the problem needs to be addressed as early in the closing process as possible. There are some of the things that I'm going to tell you today that really don't have to do with closings. But the main 2 things I'm going to talk to you about, people don't really care about it until they're involved in a closing. And when they're involved in a closing, they're involved with you. Okay, and when you all walk out of here today, you'll know that there's an easy tool that you can push a button on a computer and solve this right up front and get ahead of it instead of getting behind it. Now, I had thought when I started this that the realtors were going to be a little bit more accepting of their responsibility in this. But what I keep seeing is a desire of the realtors to push everything off on the title agent. Okay. The problem is the title agent's time in dealing with this is way more compacted than yours is. I mean, you all know that unfortunately most of us, and I've been a licensed realtor for 15 years, most of us don't put up listings and they sell the next day. Usually you're working with these people for a while. So you have more time to help them with this than the title agent does. But I can assure you the title agents are being very accepting of this because we're the ones that always have given the little 2-minute speech at the end of the closing that we're now realizing was probably doing more harm than good. And so if we can clean up our act by using something better, we're all going to start doing it. But the realtors should really be the ones getting ahead of this because you have the most time. So before we just jump into talking about portability, some of you may be sitting there going, yeah, I know what that is. I understand it. And there may be others of you that are going, what the heck is he talking about? So I want to make sure that you understand basically what portability is and where it comes from. So a little forward here. Hopefully you'll all take a little bit of time and read this. But it basically says, this is the thing and you better pay attention to it. Or sooner or later, now is somebody going to sue you? I don't know. There hasn't been that case yet, but there's a lot of case law out there that suggests that you will be sued and that the title agents will be sued. It's just a matter of time. But whether you get sued or not, you are definitely going to have a pissed off client. And that's almost just as bad because you can do good things and a person will say 2 or 3 good things about you, or you can do a bad thing and they'll say 100 bad things about you, right? Isn't that just how it works? So none of us want to upset client. So I would encourage you to read over that too. So here's the problem. Florida has probably the most generous property tax laws in the United States, but unfortunately, they're also the most complicated. There's all kinds of benefits to be had, but the problem is, to a large degree, people don't know or understand those benefits. And the other problem is, the only place that there's any chance of them learning about it is from either you or their closing agent. There is nowhere that anybody's going to hear or learn about any of this stuff other than you or the closing agent from a practical matter. Now, should they? Should we all sit down and study the tax code for the Internal Revenue Service and understand it? Yeah, but do we? No. We use an accountant or we use a CPA or we use a TurboTax or H&R Block to help us. So they kind of look at you, a customer does, who's involved in a real estate transaction as being their H&R Block or their TurboTax for these kind of issues. So believe it or not, 30% of people that are eligible for a homestead don't even file for it in Florida. They don't even file for the basic homestead. In Miami-Dade, we think it's over 60% because of the cultural differences. Okay? 80% of people don't file for portability. And I actually think it's more than 80%. That's being conservative. 95% don't know to have their market value adjusted before they sell. Now, for those of you going, what is he talking about? We'll talk more about it in a second. Millions of people don't file for exemptions that they're eligible for. Did you know that if a person's in the military and they're deployed for 60% of the year, that the next year they get 60% off their tax bill? Did you know that every senior citizen in Florida whose income drops below $30,174 gets an additional $50,000 exemption? Did you know that if a senior citizen lives in their house for 25 years, their income's below that $30,174, their home's worth less than $250,000, that they're completely exempt from paying property tax? Yeah. Did you know that yeah, you're doing just like the realtor in that last presentation, okay?
We get all these bullets.
I have this course that's an abbreviated course, and I have another one that's longer that has an appendix with a listing of more detail. And if any of you would like that, you can send me an email and I'll provide it to you. But I've learned people don't like to read, so the shorter the better. So this is the condensed version. Did you know that that if you spend money to put a granny flat on your house, you update the garage apartment or you do any of that kind of stuff and you move mom and dad or grandma and grandpa into it, you get 20% off your tax bill? Did you know that if your home is damaged by a named storm, any damage whatsoever, and you call and get a storm damage assessment, that for 3 years you have a period that you can completely remodel your house up to 110% of the square footage with no increase in your assessed value. So in other words, you can do $1 million remodel and your assessed value won't go up $1 if you had $10 in storm damage. So, you're never going to know all this stuff. But if you use a homestead check, every bit of this will be caught. Not a single thing will get missed. So there's over 30 exemptions and it's fairly complicated. So let's talk a little bit about Florida's homestead-related property tax laws. In 1992, we passed the Save Our Homes Act. It was pretty simple. It said, when you buy a home in Florida, what you pay taxes on is basically going to be what you paid for it, adjusted for inflation, and it's never going to go up any more than that. You all are probably familiar with a little bit of the details that your assessed value can't go up any more than 3% a year or CPI, whichever is less. I can tell you in my life as an attorney, it's never been 3%. It's always been less than that number, down in the 1% range, 1.5, 1.4, 1.8. So it's a very slow increase in the assessed value, the same or less than inflation. So what started happening was over the years, people would be paying taxes on a lot less than what their home was worth. And you would get people that wouldn't move because they didn't want to lose that benefit. So the legislature finally woke up. I think it was really smart in 2008. And they said, this is stupid. We don't want people to be stuck in their homes. Let them move and take some of that benefit with them. And then we get homes that are sold and remodeled, and realtors get to make money, and closing attorneys get to make money, and there's more economic activity. It's dumb to have people stuck in their homes. So we passed the portability laws effective January the 1st of 2008. Okay, well, why is this just a thing now? Well, did anybody have any portability in 2008? No, everybody's values got wiped out, and they stayed wiped out for a while. But we kind of came out of the hole. You can see here, Orlando is the blue line. In 2012, your median home in Orlando was just over $100,000, and now it's almost $200,000. So it's doubled in the last 7 years. So that's why this is now a thing. It involves these problems that I was showing you here. If you add up how much money is flushed down the toilet by homeowners that don't know about this stuff, it's about $5 or $6 billion a year. We think that it's an average of around $2,000 per homeowner is that they're paying more in property tax than they have to. So it's gotten too big to stay buried, and it's going to fight its way out from under wherever it's buried, whether we want it to or not. So the homestead laws, of course, have some non-tax related aspects. You've probably heard, any crook that knows they're going to get caught moves to Florida and buys a homestead so that they can protect it while they're in jail. They know that it's waiting on them to get out, and then they'll be able to sell it and cash out the money. So you can be protected from certain judgments and liens and legal exposure on your homestead. You've probably all heard about that. However, there are certain people that can still get you. The IRS, your local taxing municipalities. If you have a new air conditioner system put in and somebody does work on your home, they can file a lien and they can foreclose on that lien if you don't pay them. If you agree to a mortgage or a home equity line of credit and you don't pay it, they can foreclose and take your home. But there's a lot of legal judgment that comes with a homestead status on property. So, what is a homestead? Your homestead is your principal residence. It's where you intend to reside permanently. You can establish your homestead by filing an affidavit with the property appraiser's office that says, I intend to permanently reside here. And the New Yorkers do that a lot because they're playing this little game between New York and Florida. And the New York taxing authorities are chasing them like bloodhounds. And they're trying to say, no, I'm in Florida. So they file these affidavits. But from a practical standpoint, you do it by creating a homestead filing, which we'll talk more about in a second. And you've probably also learned a little bit about that when homestead property is involved, it makes a big deal whether the people are married or not, right? Hopefully all of you have figured out that in Florida, if someone is married, you can't sell their homestead property without both spouses signing off on it. So it doesn't matter whether the wife is on the deed or whether the husband's on the deed. What's on the deed doesn't matter. If they're married, you can't sell homestead property without both of them signing off. Hopefully y'all have all learned before you go wasting your time signing up a listing agreement that you get both spouses on the listing agreement. One of the biggest mistakes that realtors make is they'll go working with somebody who's about to get divorced and only have one of the spouses sign the listing agreement, or a buyer's agent's working with, the lady who's going to buy her new home as soon as she's divorced. But, most people, when they buy a home, they get a mortgage. And guess what? In Florida, if you're married, you can't get a mortgage on homestead property without both people signing off. And there's no legal separation status in Florida. You're either married or you're single. One of the two. There's no in between. So if you're not divorced yet and they're working with you as their agent to buy this new house they're going to live in after they're divorced, and the soon-to-be ex-spouse won't sign off on that mortgage, you're not going to have a closing. So a lot of real estate agents find this out the hard way. So there's some important definitions here. You have got to understand what's on this page to understand what I'm going to talk about. So the first definition is market value. And it's as simple as it gets. Market value is what it would sell for. There's more detail to it, but basically what would it sell for in a free and restricted open market within a reasonable period of time, right? It's not that complicated. But you wouldn't believe what a mess it's become. Assessed value is nothing other than the market value adjusted by the Save Our Homes Act. So you remember how the Save Our Homes Act won't let it go up any more than 3% or CPI? So when you first buy your home, the January 1 after you purchase it, you will have that initial valuation. And when you do, market value and assessed value are by definition equal. So they start out equal. And as time goes on, the market value hopefully goes up while the assessed value is staying down here pretty much a flat line. Okay, so now you get a difference between the assessed value and the market value, and that difference is what we call your portability savings or your homestead savings. Okay, it's important because you can take up to $500,000 of that with you to your next home. So taxable value. Taxable value is what we pay the tax on. And the only difference between taxable value and assessed value is taxable value is the assessed value less any exemptions. So you all know about the standard exemption of $50,000. We were talking about these other exemptions. And portability works just like an exemption. So you just take your assessed value, subtract out all your exemptions. That's your taxable value. If you look at your tax bill, that's what you're paying tax on. Okay? So it's crucial that you understand those three things. Everybody gets so wrapped around the axle and confused by this. The best example I can give is everybody gets their trim notice in August, their truth and millage rate notice. And this is the property appraiser saying, this is what I determined your market value to be. And everybody looks at it and goes, ooh, they don't know how much my property's worth. I'm getting away with something. Wrong, you're about to get screwed if you sell your house without fixing that. And what that is everybody has market value mixed up with assessed value. Okay? The property appraiser is not telling you on the trim notice what your assessed value is that you pay taxes on. He's telling you what your market value is. Okay? Your market value is not what you pay taxes on. Got it? Okay? So establishing homestead. When do you establish homestead? When you move into the property and you spend one night there with the intent of permanently remaining, you legally establish your homestead. From a practical matter, the proof that it's been established is when you go change your driver's license to that new address. Okay? Pretty simple. Now, when you establish your homestead is not yet effective. Okay? After you have established your homestead, you are now eligible to file for it. So you go down to the property appraiser's office or you do it online and you file. And it will become effective on January the 1st. You can delay filing as long as you want to, but you won't get the benefit of homestead unless you file. But you should go file as soon as your closing's over. When I do a closing, I say, as soon as you get your package in the mail with the deed and the title policy, let that be a reminder to go down and file. You can technically file as soon as the deed's recorded. Our office electronically records, and so that's usually the day of or the day after the closing. So these folks, as long as they go change their driver's license, could go down and file within 2 or 3 days. Yes, ma'am.
Just real quick, I've always wondered, somebody told me this, but I never found out how or if it's true. Is there any way that they can file, and so for instance, they purchased a house in May, right, which was technically after that March 1st. I was told that there was some way where that could still be effective January 1st.
No.
Next year.
No.
No.
That was somebody. Now, the first thing I'll tell you about Homestead is very few people know what they're talking about. And unfortunately, that includes the property appraiser's office. Okay? Property appraisers are elected officials. They can roll over every 4 years. And then there's a bunch of 20-something-year-olds that work the front desk that make 20-something. Okay? So these are not highly compensated, highly trained people that will tell you whatever it is that will get you to leave as soon as possible. Okay? Now, every property appraiser's office, there's a guy or a gal back there who's been there 20 years, who knows where all the bodies are buried, and everybody knows not to fire them or all will be lost. Okay? And most times when I'm dealing with property appraisers, not knowing what they're talking about, I will say, who is that person? And they'll go, oh, that's Jim. And I'll say, please go get Jim. And then I'll say, Jim, we've got another knucklehead on the phone. Here's the situation. And he'll go, dadgummit, I've explained that to her 15 times. She still doesn't get it. And you'll hear him yelling in the background. And then you're like, okay, here we go. Most people don't understand this stuff. My goal is after this, y'all know a little bit about it. If we can, they have me on a real tight schedule. Let's try and hold the questions to the end. I want to reserve a little bit of time at the end for questions, but we'll walk through this pretty quickly and then get some questions. So, next, market valuation. How does your market valuation get determined? It's this guy called the property appraiser. Okay, does everybody remember the Boston Tea Party? All right, that was a bunch of people that got mad about being taxed too much without representation. So we've created this slick arrangement where we elect a property appraiser. And his job is to determine the market values every January 1st. So if you ever go yell at the property appraiser about values being high or low, the property appraiser will go, I don't care if the values are high or low. My job is to determine the values, certify the tax roll, and then I send it over to this guy called the tax collector who you elected also, and he collects the money. So if you're mad about having to pay taxes, go yell at him. But it really creates a situation where it's hard to have someone to yell at. And it's hard to have another Boston Tea Party because he can go, you elected me. So the property appraiser on January 1st, how does he do it? When does he do it? On January 1st. How does he do it? He presses a button on a computer, and it's called a CAMA system, a computer-aided mass appraisal system. Would it surprise you that these systems are sometimes in error? Okay, they're quite often in error. They tend to lag increases in market value or decreases in market value. And when do you know what it was that he determined? Well, if you look at your property record cards around February, you'll all of a sudden notice working values for that year. Have any of you ever noticed that? If you look, it'll say working values 2019. And that means nothing's official yet. Well, when it becomes official is when the trim notice is sent out the second week of August. And all the trim notice is, most people don't understand what it is. The trim notice is the property appraiser going, hey, Mr. Homeowner, on January 1st, I pushed the button on my computer and it spit out this number for the market value for your property. And if you're not happy about it, you have until this date to call me and complain and reach a resolution. And if you don't, then you lose your right to argue with me. So after that date passes, which is about September 10th, September 15th in South Florida, there's areas that it's as late as September 18th. Once that date is passed, there's no more arguing about the values. the tax roll gets certified. It becomes effective October the 31st. So everybody needs to understand that market value is what it would sell for. It's determined by the property appraiser on January the 1st, and it's spit out by a computer that often has a little bit of problems. So to go in a little bit deeper now about the important stuff, we've talked about the Save Our Homes cap. Is there anybody that doesn't get the Save Our Homes cap? It was actually born in California and it migrated its way over here. And it comes from this just general philosophical feeling that it's not right to let grandma get taxed out of her home. You know, it's not her fault that Amazon built a fulfillment center down the street from her house. And now there's 8,000 Amazon employees over there and grandma's house has doubled in value. You know, you can say on one hand, well, grandma, you can sell your house and you can drive off with all that money. But she's like, I don't want to sell my house. I mean, my mom's 84 years old. I know how she's going to leave her house. It's going to be when we carry her out. But she doesn't want to leave. She's happy there. It's where her and my dad were for the 65 years that they were married. She doesn't want to leave. And so it's not right to let her tax bill go up so much where she has to leave. And that's what the Save Our Homes Act basically does. So portability, I talked about how it went into effect in 2008 and what portability did. It let you take up to $500,000 of that difference in your assessed value and your market value and move it over with you to your next home. Now, this little graph with a little piggy there is on our video on our website, how we illustrate homestead savings. So the red there is your assessed value crawling up very slowly, and the white is your market value going up, and the exposed white is what your homestead savings are. So you can see that the homestead savings are the difference between the market value and the assessed value. So if that's true, do you want your market value to be high or do you want your market value to be low? Exactly. Okay. So what this whole thing is about is if that CAMA computer system spits out a market value that's low and you're going to sell your home, does that help you or does that hurt you? It hurts you. And the amount of the error you multiply by 2%, and that's how much the tax bill is going to be higher on the next house. So every $100,000 that it's off is going to make the tax bill $2,000 a year higher on the next house. Got it? Okay, this is what everybody so far has missed. So a couple of points that you need to be aware of. Okay, the value ratio. If you move from a home to another home that's the same or higher market value, you get 100% of whatever portability you had. Okay, if you move to a home that is a lower market value, you get the ratio of the two. Got it? So if you move from a $800,000 home to a $700,000 home, you will get 7/8 of the portability that you had to move. Okay? Yeah.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
You said you lose that savings if your market value is not correct. Is that because they're taxing you on it in the
We'll go in a little more detail on this in a minute. I'm just introducing you to it right now. So the value ratio, and then the other thing you need to understand is the PEP, the portability eligibility period. Fancy laser pointer they gave me right there. The portability eligibility period. Okay, you can say it legally and it takes a long time and it's complicated, but let me teach you a simple rule to understand this. And you need to understand this as a realtor. It's important. Okay. If a person sells or relinquishes the homestead status on their property, some people don't sell it, they turn it into a rental house or something. So whenever you sell or relinquish homestead status, you have until the last day of the following year to establish your new homestead. If you don't, your portability gets wiped out. Okay, so let me give you an example of how I was so bad about that for many years. I've done hundreds of construction perm loan closings, and I don't know why, but it always seems like the house is going to get finished around Christmas, right? And so I would always tell people that my advice was for them to take a chill pill with the builder and finish the first or second week of January. Because why? Because then you get another year of unimproved value on just the lot, right? Okay. But what if doing that moves you beyond the end of that next year and you flush $10,000 a year portability savings down the toilet? Was that a good thing to do? Heck no. I mean, you might have saved $15,000 by the tax bill not being increased that 1 year, but then you're going to get hammered for 10 grand a year every year after that. So now I realize that I have to think a little bit before I give people that advice. It involves doing a little bit of math. How much portability do they have to move? And what's the savings they're going to get by moving in a little bit later? Because in general, by the time somebody starts plans, builds a house, gets it finished, it wraps around that year. Now, you will have a lot of people say, oh, the deal is you have to do it within 2 years. All right. That's a dangerous thing to say, because if you remember what I taught you, you realize if you sell your house on, say, January the 3rd, you have that whole rest of the year and the whole rest of the next year. That's almost 2 years. Okay. But what if you sold it on December the 30th? You only have 1 day left in the year, and then you get the next year. So that's pretty much 1 year. So it can range from almost 1 year to almost 2 years. So you can really trip people up by saying the 2 year thing. Everybody needs to know when they sell their homestead or they relinquish the homestead status on it, what that looming date is that they need to be into their next homestead before they lose their savings.
So it's 1 year from the date of closing?
Nope. The date that you sell or relinquish, you have until the last date of the following year to be established in your new homestead. That means you've bought it, you've moved into it, and you've changed your driver's license. Got it? Very important. You will have people get really hurt. You imagine somebody who moves into you're helping this buyer, okay? And no one discusses this. And it ends up that they buy their house and get moved in January 11th. And if they had moved in December 30th, they'd have had 10 grand a year lower tax bill for the rest of their life. Isn't this a big deal? Yeah. So, okay. How does portability work? Like I said, it works just like an exemption. What happens if you forget to file for portability? If you forget to file for portability, then you lose that exemption. So how can that happen? Well, most people go down and they say, I'm going to file for homestead, and the person gives them a DR 501 form. And unless they say the magic P word, nobody says anything about portability. They don't give them the other form that they need to fill out. And they leave thinking that they've done everything they were supposed to do, but they didn't file for portability. There's a separate form for it. So exemptions, we've talked a little bit about how there's different classes of exemptions. One interesting piece of trivia to know is exemptions involving disabled veterans. If they forgot to file for them, you can actually go back 4 years and get a refund for the years that they forgot to file. And how does an exemption work? It comes off the assessed value and lowers the amount that you pay taxes on. So there's 4 things that you need to check to make sure that homestead is covered. The first thing is you just want to check and make sure that they friggin' filed for homestead. You don't believe how many closings I do when I get them to pay a little bit of attention and we find out that they've been living in a house 9 years that they never filed homestead on. 30% of people don't do it. The second thing is, did they fail to file for portability? Now, why is this important if you're involved in a closing? Okay. So my office, say we're handling a closing that you sent us as the listing agent, and they've lived in that house for 5 or 6 years. Okay. But they forgot to file for portability on it. And the house before, they lived there 15 years. So they had $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in portability, that because they didn't file one stupid piece of paper, that money's sitting there unclaimed. Okay, so how did it hurt them? All those years that they've lived in that house that we're selling, they didn't get that exemption. So they were out that much money on their tax bill. But why do we care now that they're selling it anyway? We care a bunch because if we figure out that that happened and they forgot to file for portability, guess what? We can go file the one stupid piece of paper and grab it and pull it into this house that we're about to sell so that it can now be passed forward into the next house. Now, if you call most property appraisers and you say, I bought a house 5 years ago and I forgot to file for portability and I'm calling because I want to come down and file for portability, they'll say, well, I'm sorry, sir. It's been more than 2 years. You can't file. And they are absolutely wrong. Remember I told you how property appraisers don't understand homestead? What they're getting mixed up, you remember that little 2-year thing people throw around sometimes for portability? They're getting that mixed up in their heads. That's not what the statute says. Okay, the statute says as long as you move into the replacement home by the end of the following year, you have your portability. But if you forgot to file for it, it doesn't matter whether it was a year or 5 years or 8 years when you realize you forgot. You can go down and file the stupid form and you will start getting it from then on. And a lot of property appraisers will tell you, no, that's not how it works. And you need to go and ask for the guy in the back when that happens. Okay? And then he'll yell at the girl who told you that in the front. So when we're doing a closing, that's like one of the simplest things to ask somebody is, are you sure you filed for portability on this house? The problem is 9 out of 10 people don't know the answer to the question. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, now we're getting ready to sell this house and we need to really make sure that everything's in good shape with your property tax. Did you file for portability? What's that? Doris, did we file? I don't know. Howard, and around you go. So one of the things that a homestead check does is it's actually fairly complicated to figure out whether or not somebody filed for portability if they don't even know themselves. But we have this mega database that we can instantaneously search and figure it out. So you want to make sure that they file for portability and catch that. Now, if it's after March 1st and you go down to the property appraiser's office and say, I'd like to file this one stupid form y'all should have told us about to begin with so that these people have portability, they'll go, oh, thank you so much. And they'll take it and file it. But what they won't tell you is that they're going to make it effective the next year.
Right.
Which doesn't help you, okay? In most cases, you can get late filing approved up until October the 31st. So most of the time, with just a little bit of shucking and jiving, you can get them to take it and make it effective for your closing that you're involved in, okay? So the third thing that you want to check for is their market value. Remember our chart here. I could, if we have time, I'll show you, but I can tell you we've done a little bit of research and there are a bunch of Lang Realty listings where your customers have like next to no portability at all and their market values are off $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. There's a bunch of them that are off in your brokerage for more than $500,000, which means that if you don't identify this and you don't address it before these people sell their house, their tax bill is going to be $10,000 a year higher. Now, do you know what their house is going to sell for? Well, you took the listing, ballpark, okay? Do you know what their market value is? Heck yeah, you all know how to access a property record card. It's a 2-second thing to identify. But there's a little more to it than that. And again, we get deeper into the math and the homestead check. But it's something you can at least spot check really quick and know if it's an issue that ought to be paid attention to or not. And a lot of times it's super, super easy to fix. It can be fixed with one freaking phone call to the property appraiser's office. Yes, ma'am.
Is it something that if it was say sold and it was the market value on the thing like $100,000 less than it's sold for, can you correct that?
No, after it's sold, it's too late. Yeah, it's too late. So, you can also have high assessed value. That's the old-timey thing to be worried about. Back in the old days, you had these property tax consulting companies that would say, we'll lower your tax bill guaranteed. Well, that was, they were going to go argue that your assessed value was too high and they're going to get it lowered. Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. It's extremely rare that you see that right now. And it's why you don't find any attorneys like Seth and I that specialize in this kind of stuff, because every attorney in the state of Florida that deals with property tax, guess what they do? They represent people that own shopping malls and skyscrapers, and they spend all their time trying to get the assessed values down on those commercial properties. No one's ever thought that you needed to get people's market values up on residential homestead properties. And there's no money in it for attorneys, so no attorneys do it. The money's going to be them suing people that don't do it. Yes,
Can you share with the group the fact that if we get those market values up, that's not going to adversely impact the actual tax bill? Everybody's afraid. Oh my God.
Yeah. So we even have property appraisers sometimes will say, that's crazy. Why would anybody want to raise their market value? That's going to cost them extra money in taxes. And we're like, really? Seriously? I've heard this from property appraisers. I've heard this from licensed real estate appraisers. I go, so you think market value is what they pay taxes on? Well, yeah, absolutely. No, you pay tax on assessed value, not market value. Market value is, the assessed value is held down by the Save Our Homes Act. Does everybody have that? That's a really basic point. And 99 out of 100 people, when they get their trim notice, they think they're getting away with something when they see that low market value. And it's because people have a natural urge to want to think they're getting away with something. So let me plug through the rest of this and then we'll get some questions. So what happens if you fail to file for an exemption? Well, you're going to lose the money you would have had, and portability is just another exemption. So how do you fix this stuff when you identify it? Well, if you didn't file for homestead, you fix it by going down and filing for homestead. That's not too complicated. Part of the service that Florida Homestead Check offers is we'll do statewide filings. There's a lot of people that don't want to go down to the property appraiser's office. We'll do it for them if they want us to. Failure to file for portability. How do you fix that? You go down and you file that one stinking form called a DR501T that nobody ever tells anybody about, and that fixes it. What do you do about inaccurate market value? There's a little more to that. We'll talk about it in a second. And what if you forget to file for an exemption? Well, you go down and file for it. So if you need to fix market value, how do you fix it? Well, the first thing that you do is you call up the property appraiser and you say, hey, there's a big issue in the market value on this property. 9 out of 10 property appraisers think you're about to say, they think you're really talking about high assessed value and you're wanting them to lower the value. And you go, no. This is a house that's getting ready to be sold and they only have 50,000 portability and the market value is off by over $1 million and they should have $500,000. So a lot of times when we started our company August 19th, we sent a letter to all 67 property appraisers in Florida. And we said, we just want to let you know we're here and we just want to let you know what we're going to be doing. And we hope you see us as a positive thing because your goal is to be as accurate as you can with the market valuations. And where we determined that you weren't accurate, we're going to help you. And by the way, the person who designed all of your camera systems that you used works for us. So don't start telling me about your camera system because one of our people designed and implemented your camera system. So we know exactly what your camera system does. And usually when they hear the name Cassie Vargas, they start shaking in their shoes, okay? Because she is the person for 15 years that they've all turned to for this stuff. So you call and you let them know that there's a problem. And you're entitled by law to an informal conference. They have to give it to you. And so what you do is you present your reasons that you think they're wrong, and they either accept it or they don't. What would your reasons be that they're wrong? Well, we got a contract on the house and I'm holding it in my hand. And you're saying as of January 1st, the value was $600,000 and I'm holding a contract in my hand on September, whatever today is, for $500,000 more than that. That would probably indicate that you were off. Now, their favorite thing to do is to say, we don't have to take anything into account that happened after January 1st. That's why if someone hires the Homestead Doctors, the very first thing that we do, we have an appraisal network of over 200 appraisers around the state that understand what we're after, and they do an appraisal that is dated as of this magic date of January 1. So when we hand that to the property appraiser goes, oh, nope, you can't give us an appraisal. Anything after January 1, we don't have to take into account. And we say, look at the date on the appraisal. They go, oh, January 1. And so if you do that, you'll win every time. But most of the time, just calling up and saying, we've got a contract on the property, obviously you're way off. And a lot of times people already have some portability. So let's say they already have $200,000 worth of portability. How much more is there to get? 300,000. Yeah, 500,000 is the max. And if your market value is off by $500,000 or $600,000, you don't even need them to adjust it to what the market value is. You just need them to adjust it to a little portion of what the error is. And those are really easy ones to win. So most of the time, you can have a rational conversation with a property appraiser and get them to make a reasonable adjustment and have that fixed. Now, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll say, oh, well, all this is preliminary. Nothing's official until the trim notices come out in August. So call us back in August. Now, the reason that they do that is they figure you're going to sell the house between now and then, and that's going to wipe out the whole thing and they're going to get rid of you. Okay? Well, I learned that real early in the game, and I spent a bunch of time with the Florida Department of Revenue, General Counsel's Office, VAB staff attorneys, and I developed an addendum, and it's called the Market Value Adjustment Addendum. And if they try that on us, then we have the buyer and seller sign this addendum. And what it basically says is the buyer assigns the right to the seller to continue the challenge. And as long as you get that addendum signed before the closing, you can go ahead and close. And then you come back in August and you say, hey, here we are again. We called you in February. You wouldn't be reasonable. You said call in August. Here we are. And they go, oh yeah, but you sold the home. You can't talk to me anymore. You go, nope, here's a copy of this addendum. And they go, oh. Okay, so you want to use that addendum. And it's copyrighted. It's a Florida homestead check asset. But anyone who gets a homestead check gets access to the addendum. So, what happens if you call them up when the trim notices come out and you say, remember us, we asked you to be reasonable, the property now has sold for this much or is still pending sale for this much, freaking adjust it, man. And they go, nope, not going to do it. I'm going to be a jerk. I'm going to sit here and argue and not going to do it. Well, then you file this thing called a VAB petition. And it sounds really scary, but it's unbelievably easy. And it costs $15 to file. And the VAB boards everybody thinks are there to back up the property appraiser. They're really not. The VAB boards are there to look out for the taxpayer. And as long as you present reasonable evidence of why you want it adjusted, my experience, and I've handled dozens and dozens of these cases, is 99.9% of the time they give you what you want. So it's a really easy process. Now, if you're sitting here going, how the heck am I supposed to know about all this stuff? How am I supposed to handle this? Really, your job is just to identify the issue and then send them somewhere for help. When we do a homestead check for someone, it tells them exactly what the issue is. It tells them exactly how much money is involved, and it tells them step-by-step instructions for how to fix it. There's even a little video at the end of each step on what you need to do. Now, people tend to be lazy and they don't want to do stuff. So then we have our whole counseling department, the homestead counselors they can call and ask all these questions, and the homestead doctors that'll fix it for them if they want to. But the very first thing a homestead doctor says is, sir, you really don't need us. If you will read this, it tells you exactly what to do. And they'll go, do you take credit cards? They don't want to do it themselves. So does everybody have to be worried if you have a low market value? No. Okay, first of all, nothing that I'm saying applies to anything except homestead properties. Okay? And no one cares about portability if they're not going to need it. Okay? So if you're leaving Florida and going to South Carolina or wherever and never coming back, you don't care if you lose your portability. You're not going to use it anymore. Okay. You also don't care if your market value is low if you already have the $500,000. A lot of you work with people in very high value homes, and the high value homes tend to get the $500,000 pretty quickly, as long as they remember to file homestead and as long as they remember to file for portability. So if they already have the $500,000, they don't need any more. It's not going to do them any good. You'd never need to get their market value adjusted. So just remember those couple points. It doesn't matter to everyone. So when can we fix these things? If they forgot to file for a homestead, you want to fix it as soon as possible so they get the benefits. But remember, the filing date is what? March 1st. So if you miss that, you can ask to be approved for late filing, and they will use this word for you with you, this phrase. They'll say that you must demonstrate particular extenuating circumstances. So you need to say something like, grandma was sick, my dog got run over, something. Don't just say, I forgot. But if you come up with anything halfway convincing at all, they'll usually approve you for late filing. Now, if you've got a market value issue, the door slams shut on the last day for filing VAB petitions. And after that date, you can't fix a market value issue if the home is selling during that year. And we're there now. The door slammed shut here on September the 18th. We found that if we go yell hurricane a few times, they might extend it just a little bit, but that door slammed shut. So if you're selling a home in this calendar year, if it's going to close, it's too late to get the market value adjusted. You know, sorry, I say it's like penicillin. It was a great thing to have, but unfortunately it couldn't cure everything. So, you know, these folks at least need to know what happened to them so they don't let it happen again. But our philosophy at Florida Homestead Check is if you know that your market value is off, you shouldn't wait until you're selling to fix it, because you could end up like a bunch of people are right now. You need to fix it no later than the year before. But if it turns out you end up selling earlier than you thought, I mean, how many of you handle listings that the people, you know, didn't plan on selling then? That something happened, they got transferred or they got divorced or whatever happened and they're having to sell, so they could get caught during this period of time.
What's
So-
your actual date?
Well, it varies through the state, but the official date is 25 days after the date the trim notices were mailed. From a practical standpoint, that means sometime between September the 10th and September the 18th. If you look at a trim notice for your area, it'll say what that date is. I think down here it was September the 18th. There are
When? September 18th to when?
every year you can challenge values up until that date.
Up to September 18th?
And when that date comes and goes, you can't do any more challenges that year. But then when you get closings that are closing after the first of the year, the door opens back up again. Okay. It's just the people that are closing between now and the end of the year that are SOL. So there are certain filings that are considered to piggyback on top of the base homestead filing, and that's your portability and your exemptions. So in general, if you forget to file for portability or you forget to file for an exemption, they'll let you file it late up until October the 31st. So there's a lot more leeway with those. So the paperwork, the form that you file for homestead is the DR-501. The transfer or portability form is the DR-501T. And then the DR-486 you use to file a VAB petition. And then there's a bunch of exemption related forms. The form of this course that has an appendix and the full list of exemptions, I can send to you. If any of you want it, shoot me an email. This is the abbreviated one because I wanted to keep it short. So we'll get to the questions in just a second. So let's conclude. So how would a Florida homeowner learn about this stuff?
Title person.
I'm used to it. I've been in this business 23 years, okay? I've been blamed somehow for screen doors not being
I mean,
fixed.
what if you say
Okay.
something, they don't understand it, then all of a sudden it's your fault because
Well, if you're trying to avoid liability by sticking your head in the sand, just remember that your butt is sticking up in the air. Okay? Sooner or later, somebody's going to come along with a big boot on and kick it. All right? So sooner or later, this will blow back because it's too much money now. So how would they know when to file, where to file, how to manage portability, any of this stuff? You know, they need to get some education from you. Now look at this. 89% of homes are sold in Florida with a realtor. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
You know, but guess what? The fastest growing title company in the state of Florida is? Nope.
Your company.
Unfortunately, it's called Open Door Title. Have any of you heard of Open Door? Okay. They completely remove realtors from the equation. They're based out of Atlanta. They're one of the fastest growing companies in America. They've got billions of dollars in capital behind them, and their title company is the fastest growing title company in Florida right now, which shows how fast they're grabbing market share. So if you want to hang on to this 89%, you got to show some value. Open Door sure as heck isn't going to help anyone with this stuff. You can. So do realtors explain about this stuff? Most realtors just sign up for a little marketing service that sends a reminder to file homestead card. And that's about all they do. Do CPAs explain about this? Good luck finding one that understands anything about it. Do tax lawyers explain it? Who uses a tax lawyer? You know, almost no one. I went almost 20 years in my practice without knowing about this stuff. You're not going to find many people that know about it. Unfortunately, I can say that I know more about property tax law than any attorney in the state of Florida. That's a dubious honor, let me promise you. So how do people find out about anything? You know, so far it's pretty much been the title and closing agents with our little speech at the end of the closing. But we've all realized that that's not cutting it now. Hopefully we'll realize that and we'll start doing something better. So what's the problem with the way that it is? Usually no one mentions anything about any of this. The little speech at closing doesn't get it. It's too late to fix if they had low market value or if they forgot to file for portability, and there's no education out there. And then ask yourself this question, this last thing. So you got a guy who's 63 years old and he files for homestead, and then 2 years later he turns 65. How's he supposed to know he's eligible for that additional exemption now? You know, how's somebody who's deployed military supposed to know? There's no way to know. Everybody thinks that some safety net is put in place when you file for homestead, and the property appraiser is going to call you and tell you when you're eligible for an additional exemption. Okay, we should all know better than that. So what are some solutions? The first one is you realtors can become better educated. You've all done that this morning. And you can address this at the beginning of the sale process. Title agents can become better educated. I'm spending a lot of time educating title agents. Yesterday, 2 of them in Vero Beach. Number 3, you can use, and I call it a generic term, a property tax analysis report solution. You remember how no one ever used to talk about municipal lien searches? How many of you regularly have municipal lien searches done now? Probably all of you. So that started in 2016, and now that's become a really important thing to protect homeowners. So this is becoming a new thing. I will stick my neck out and say that in a year or 2, you're probably not going to find a lot of people that aren't addressing this in some way, shape, or form. And so this was sponsored, of course, by Florida Homestead Check. And the last thing that I want to show you is I've made you all a checklist to use. Did anybody see the email with the checklist?
I can see any of it.
Okay. So here's your checklist I made for you. Okay. I'm a pilot, so I said don't land until the landing checklist is completed. So a little bit about me, the same 4 words saying this is a thing, pay attention to it. And here's your 1-page checklist for a seller. Okay, if you're working with a seller, whip this out and go through these questions. If you identify an issue on any of these, the next page tells you what to do for each one of those results. Then if you're working with a buyer, you have a 1-page one for the buyer. And then the next couple pages say what to do with the results. Okay, buyers need to get at least an education so they know what they're getting into and don't get off on the wrong foot. and think how often the buyer still owns their prior home, and that needs to be checked before they sell it. So the conclusions are, do the checklist, and if you handle all this, you won't have a problem. One of the things that our company offers is a product called Homestead Monitoring. Anyone who gets a homestead check for 90 days can sign up for Homestead Monitoring. It's $75 a year, and every year they'll get a link at the most strategic time of the year, if they've made a mistake, to have them update their information, and then it'll check to see, did the property appraiser throw in a crazy valuation? Did they become eligible for an exemption? And it will make sure that that is caught. So if they've got something better to spend $75 a year on, I understand, but I think it would be a pretty good way to spend $75 a year. So that's the end of my presentation, but I will be glad to answer a few questions if you still have time. I don't know what your time frame is with getting out of here. So,
Like,
yeah.
I just want to ask.
Okay.
Excuse me, if the property appraiser's office, if you're calling on behalf of a seller, you've got a contract in your hand and you're trying to improve their market value, will they talk to you?
Most of the time, yes. She was asking, will the property appraiser even talk with you? If you identify yourself in any kind of representational capacity, I'm their realtor, I'm helping them with this, then they will generally talk to you. Yeah. Next question.
Is that calculated affordability button fairly accurate on the,
I did notice that your county has a calculate portability button, and I'm sure it calculates it perfectly accurately with the wrong market value. So, yes, ma'am.
if your client already buys a house and they're in the process of selling the house, can you transfer the affordability to the house they already bought?
So the question is, they're buying a house and they still own their prior house.
And they own the new house already?
So they've bought the new house and they are still living in their old house. Absolutely. When they decide they're ready to move and they move into the new house and they change their driver's license, they have then relinquished their homestead on their last house, and they can just fill out that DR 501T form and move their portability right into the next house. Yes.
They've already closed on this other house.
Yes.
And they've moved in it.
Okay.
Okay, but then the other house, we're closing on, we're running into this house. So we're closing on the other house.
Okay. I understand what you're asking. So she's saying they bought the new house, they moved into it, they're living in there. Can they still move their portability, or did it kill it when they did that? Remember the little portability eligibility period I told you about? Okay. When these people left their last house, legally, the day that they left and didn't live there anymore, they relinquished their portability. Now, from a practical matter, that occurred when they changed their driver's license to the new address. That's the date the property appraiser can see. So on that date, when they moved from this house, they had until the end of the following year to get into the new house, which they obviously did. So they meet the test and they can move their portability. Now, let me give you one more example if there's some confusion. Let's say that that your client sells their house and they say, we're going to do this around the world cruise. And then when we get back, we're going to look for and buy another house. You would say, well, Horace and Doris, enjoy your world cruise, but remember that since we just closed today in September of 2019, you need to be back from that cruise. You need to have gotten me involved again to find you your next house. And we need to have closed on it, and you need to have moved into it and changed your driver's license by when?
December 31.
December 31st of next year. That's right. Yes, sir.
How far back can I go with my customers to help them with affordability?
Yeah, so you have a customer who you think may have forgotten to file for portability. So long as, now remember, portability is, if your customer has been living in their house for 20 years, okay, they're not going to have, they have their portability stored up and accrued in that house which is going to move to the next house. Okay. If what you're worried about is this customer is living in a house that they've been in for 5 years, 6 years, and they didn't file for portability on it, and they lived in another house a long time before then, and there's maybe portability that they didn't move in because they never filed. The date that portability became effective was January 1st of 2008. So if they, and the law said that if you sold in 07, you would still get it. So if your customer has been living in their house since 2008 or after, you would want to make sure they had filed portability. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So when a person purchases a home, usually the immediate market value put in the system, usually 90 or 85% of the purchase price. It depends on county. I think for ours it's 85%.
Mhm.
90%. So it's already off by 10 or 15%. So you're talking about adjusting it down the road. You may trail at that same pace or not.
Yeah, he brought up that, and I used to notice this too. I used to tell people at a closing, I'd say, okay, so you bought your home, and on January 1st, the property appraiser is going to establish the new value of your home. And it's going to probably end up being about 90% of what you paid for it. I was right, but I didn't understand what I was saying. Believe it or not, when the property appraiser does that initial valuation, they don't really look at what the person paid for that particular home. They look at comps. And if someone got it for a steal, they're not going to reward them for that. And if someone overpaid, they're not going to punish them for that. They're going to use comps. But the reason for this 10, 15% you noticed is there's a statute that says that the property appraiser will adjust the market value to account for the cost of sale. And they can do that up to 15%. And most of them use that 15%. So one of the things that we do when we're addressing a low market value condition is, let's say the house is selling for $1 million and it's on the tax rolls for market value of $600,000. So it's $400,000 off. Okay, we take that $1 million because the first thing the property appraiser is going to say is, well, I get to adjust it for the cost of sale. So they're going to pull down that value by 15%. And you're not going to be after $1 million, you're going to be after $850,000, but that's still $250,000 difference. So that's how the cost of sale comes into play. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is it right to assume that if you own a house under a LLC, you cannot get it?
Yeah, homestead is only available to natural persons. And here's a tidbit you guys will be interested in down here in South Florida. Okay, we were at the Orlando Home and Patio Show last weekend, and we had an English couple come up to the booth and say, well, man, it's a real shame. We would have loved to have had homestead, but we're from England, and so we can't. And I said, well, do you live here? Is this your primary residence? And they said, oh yeah, we live here year round, but we're British citizens, so we can't have homestead. And I said, who told you that? Because believe it or not, if someone is a foreign national, the only requirement for them to file homestead is they have to be here legally. So they can be here on a visa, they can be here on an asylum application. As long as they are here under color of law, then they can file for homestead. Yep. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So you were saying earlier that your assessed value is not at all determined by your market value.
The definition of assessed value is market value adjusted for the Save Our Homes Act.
Okay, so if you're going to go and increase someone's market value, that's clearly going to increase their assessed value.
No, your assessed value cannot go up any. This is the most common misperception. The assessed value cannot go up by any more than what?
3%.
Or CPI, whichever is less. So I can adjust
Go up 3%.
I can adjust your market value up as high as I want, but your assessed value can only move 3% or CPI, whichever is
So will it
less.
still rise?
Well, the assessed value wouldn't move until the next year anyway.
But it will still rise. So if they ask me, I have to
Well,
say
assessed
yes.
values always rise. Every year assessed values rise. Your average market value increase in Florida for the last, I mean, what I was showing you there earlier is something like 7 or 8%. So all the property appraisers in every county raise assessed values by that CPI number. But that's the most they can move it. So you're never gonna have to worry about that because that's always there
I just
anyway.
don't wanna tell my clients, no, it won't rot,
You can tell them that.
but it will, I'm
No.
lying to them.
No, you are
It
not.
can go
You
up
are not.
3%.
Your assessed value can only go up 3% or CPI, whichever is less. And what I'm telling you is that happens anyway, every single year. You adjusting the market value is going to have no effect on that. And we can talk more about it when we're done. Yep. Thank you.
So how do they contact you if they wanna have a Florida homestead check? What do you do?
The question is, what if you want someone to do a homestead check? You would just tell your client, look, there's a bunch of complicated issues with this stuff, and I would feel a lot better if you got a homestead check before we embark on this journey together. And they just go to FloridaHomesteadCheck.com, click on Start a Check. It'll ask them the questions they need to answer, and then they'll get their homestead check very quickly, usually within 5 minutes.
What's the fee?
It's $100.
What kind of discount rate are you gonna give Klein Realty if you wanna give them out for a closing?
We'll talk about that. We can talk about that. But actually, if you want to sign up as a rep with Florida Homestead Check, you can. And then the price is $125 instead of $100, but you get $25 of it.
What do you mean by a rep? Every single time we use you?
Yeah, if you want to, it takes 3 minutes to sign up, and then your customers will pay $125 and you get $25. And it's actually better for them if you do that because we have you put in some additional information that a general member of the public wouldn't know how to put in.
Can we put that on our closing statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it checks everything. Yeah, everything. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. If any of you have questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes. Yeah.